The session that we're about to go into is around end of life and advanced care planning. And today with us, we've got Ruth Hosken to join us and talk to us about advanced care planning. So people with Huntington's have varying approaches to the future, with some wanting to make plans and others avoiding to think about the future or not wanting to worry about it just yet. However, it appears that the majority of people with Huntington's do have thoughts about end of life and advanced staged HD and would like to discuss end of life care, but don't know how, when, or with whom they need to have these conversations. This presentation will explore issues around advanced HD, end of life, and advanced care plans. Welcome, Ruth, and thank you for today.
Hello, thank you all for coming. I guess my first point is that for some people this might be a little bit confronting and it might trigger things or it might make you feel distressed, and I won't be the slightest bit offended if anyone feels the need to just get up and leave if it does, touch on areas that you're not quite ready to go to. And I suppose the next thing is, how does this topic fit in with the conference theme of hope? And I did wonder that myself and thought, well, I feel really strongly that hope has many facets to it. And for me, advanced care planning is about having control and having the opportunity to have a say about your future and have some control over the future. And to me, that's an element of hope. So hopefully we can all see that might fit together. So I work at Calvary Health Care Bethlehem in Melbourne, and our service is called the Statewide Progressive Neurological Disease Service, and Calvary is a publicly funded not-for-profit hospital in the southern metropolitan region of Melbourne. So we have an inpatient unit, but predominantly we work through the outpatient service, and it's probably similar to many services that you attend. So what is advanced care planning? And there are a number of different words for this. So some people talk about advanced care directives and some people call them end-of-life care plans. They're all the same thing, they just come by different names at times. So I guess the way to look at it is it's a process to plan ahead of time for when you may lose ability to make or communicate decisions. Now, every single one of us should have an advanced care plan because none of us know what's around the corner tomorrow. And in fact, that's probably one way in which people with Huntington's have a bit more information, because they have a bit more information about what their future might be. And so it, in some ways, makes the advanced care planning more realistic. So what it includes is a documented set of preferences detailing your wishes for future healthcare, including end-of-life care. And it allows the person's wishes to be heard even when they can no longer communicate. There's a number of different components of an advanced care plan, and I've tried to look at my terminology here to make it so that it represents all the different states, because the terms are different in different states. So the first component of an advanced care plan is a substitute decision maker. Then there is a values directive, which is where you record your values and preferences. And then the third component, which is an optional component, is an instructional directive. Now, I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail as we go along. So, and I know this was touched on a little bit in one of the earlier sessions, but a good place to start is thinking about who would you want to be involved in your healthcare? Who would you want to be making decisions on your behalf in the future? And some of us just go for the logical default of our partner. That seems to be kind of a logical thing. But what would happen if your partner had a different set of values to you? For example, what if they felt that you need to be kept alive at all costs and that's not what you want? How would that go? Where would that be for you? So it's good to have a think about it and think about who is that person that's going to best represent what you want. How are they going to know what you want? Because let's face it, how many of us sit down over dinner and go, yeah, let's talk about end of life. What do you want? We don't do that. We're not good at it. It's sort of something that we push aside and we just keep going, oh, we'll come back to that sometime. So the advanced care plan gives an opportunity to formalise, to actually have those discussions, to give you permission to talk about those things. And I guess it also gives you an opportunity to say, will they be able to carry out my wishes, or do I need to be looking for someone else? You know, is there someone else in my family or network that might be the better person? One of the big things to think about when you're thinking about coming up with an advanced care plan, and this is part of your values directive, is looking at what are your values? A good starting point is, do you prefer to think of quality of life or length of life? So some people are happy to stay, they want length of life and they will stay alive for as long as they can because that's really important to them no matter what the quality of life. There are other people who have really clear ideas about what quality of life means to them, and they have endpoints where they think, actually, if I have to be in a nursing home, maybe that's when I don't want to continue life for too much longer. So it gives you an opportunity to explore these things. I always think of a lady I worked with who was for her, length of life was the most important thing because she wanted to see her grandchildren to get as old as she possibly could. So she didn't care about quality of life, she just wanted to be around. There's no right or wrongs here, it's all about what feels right for you. So we talk about quality of life. What does it actually mean? Like if you're going to say, actually, my quality of life is more important, I suspect if all of us in this room were asked what does quality of life mean, we'd have a different answer because it's so individual. One of my colleagues at work who works in pastoral care has come up with, so she does a lot of talking with people around end of life, and she's come up with these Fs that she thinks are the things. She asks people what are the things that are most important to them, and she thinks that we can combine them down into these few Fs. So for some people it's family, friends, fun, and fun can mean different things to different people. I mean, I'm certainly not going to be taking up ballroom dancing for fun, but I can understand someone else would. And when I listened to Sally and Alicia earlier and they're, cycling and running, and I just went, yep, that's probably not for me, but I can see where that fits and how important that is to somebody else. Faith for some people is important, and that can mean all sorts of different things. For some people, money's important, and money and prestige that goes with that. Firm was because we couldn't work out how to put work in there. So she came to the conclusion that for some people, work has been their number one thing, that it has been important to them for all their lives and has given them meaning. And so just to try and make an F, we went for firm, like the company. It kind of works, doesn't it? So what's really important here is if you're going to write in your advanced care plan that quality of life's important, you want to spell out what it is about quality of life. Is it that it's important for you to be able to see the sunshine? Is it important for you to still be able to run around? Is it important that you get to see your dog? All those things are going to be different to different people, and if you don't write it down, other people are just going to be guessing what it means for you. Another way to think about your values is to also think about your life in terms of risk versus safety. And unfortunately, we know that as HD advances, there are some risks that become more prevalent. And I'm just going to pick a couple of examples of these, being eating and drinking, and the difficulties of swallowing difficulties and the risks of aspiration and chest infections, and walking. And walking becomes more and more difficult and poses greater risks. So if we think about, I guess, some of the risks, I've already mentioned a couple, but if we think about choking or aspiration for eating and drinking, falling and hitting your head, which might cause bleeding around the brain, or breaking of bones, these are all risks, and you need to have a think about for yourself what is more important, having an opportunity to still do things that pose a risk, or is it being kept safe? And I guess if you were going for quantity of life, so length of life, then safety is probably going to be your best friend. Keeping safe is more likely to keep you alive for longer. So it's looking at how those things balance up together. Now, we've developed a booklet at Calvary, which I have made available, and so I will work out how you can get a copy of that if you want to. It's called Thinking About the Future with HD, and it's a step-by-step approach to going through an advanced care plan development. And one of the parts, it goes for a couple of pages in it. I've just taken a little sample here, and it gets you to have a think about what life would be like if. And so, for example, if you needed help with communicating, it asks you to think about, would that be okay? Would it be difficult but acceptable? Would it be worth living but just barely? Not worth living? Or you just don't know? And so it goes through a whole heap of these sorts of points of things that might happen I guess, with the changes in Huntington's, and gets you to have a think about what that would be like. So, for example, the bottom one there is needing to spend a day in a chair or a wheelchair. Is that okay? Is that acceptable? And for some people it will be, and for other people that will just seem too hard and something that they don't want to think about. Very individual. No one else should be telling you what the right or the wrong is. It's just about you having a look at that and determining what works best for you. Now, all those things can be summed up together in a values statement. So, and we'll talk a bit more about what that looks like. But the next part that you can have a think about in terms of your advanced care plan is life-prolonging treatments. And there are different ways of approaching this in advanced care plan. So one is you can use an instructional directive, which is legally binding, where you can say what you don't want to have. Okay, so if any of these are things you didn't want to have and you really didn't want to have it, then you would want to record that. For others, it might depend on the circumstances, and we'll talk a bit more about some of the stages a little bit later. But the main life-prolonging treatments that we talk about in relation to Huntington's disease is peg feeding, so artificial food and nutrition. We don't do these very often in Australia. America, they do a lot more, and I think it's around insurance and things like that. There's a whole heap of different factors at play. But sometimes a feeding tube might be suggested when someone's starting to get a lot of chest infections and they're having a lot of coughing and choking when they're eating and drinking. Now, the thing about a feeding tube is it might prolong your life, and it might reduce the risk of food or drink going down into your lungs, but it doesn't take away the risk altogether. Okay? And it comes with a whole heap of other things to think about, because if it's going to keep you alive for longer, but at a really advanced stage of Huntington's disease where you're not having a great quality of life any longer, then you might want to think about, is that really something that you want to have or you don't want to have? The next question, and this one you're probably more familiar with because this tends to get asked every time you go into hospital these days. They always want to know if you want to be resuscitated or not. And this is complicated in Huntington's disease, and it's complicated in advanced care plans because you've got to think about it in two ways. So one might be if you had a heart attack and you dropped dead, just say I did now, do I want you to be resuscitating me or not? And, you know, that's, again, going to be an individual choice about your stage of life. The thing to remember about resuscitation is that the success rate of it is very low, and it's even lower if you have a complex medical condition and you're in a weakened state because of the progression of the Huntington's. And so for many people, this is a big thing to think about because it's not comfortable, it's not a great way for life to end. And so again, it's one of those things that's worth thinking about. And we'll come to some stages a little further down the track. Now, antibiotics is a really interesting question. And I tend to really hammer home an alternative view on this, and I only do it not because it's necessarily my strongly held opinion, but just because what you hear mostly out in the general community and in health services is if you have an infection, you must have antibiotics and you must treat it. It's actually an option. You don't have to have antibiotics to treat an infection. It's okay to say no. It's okay to think about whether that's what you want or not. Now, most people who need antibiotics are only going to need them in an oral form and for a short period of time. So let's say you get that chest infection, you have the oral antibiotics maybe for 5 days, you recover, life continues on. But sometimes the infection might be bad, might be a bit worse, you might be in not such a good state, and you don't recover so well, or the oral antibiotics aren't really helping. And so at this time, you might be offered or suggested to you that you go to hospital and you need to have antibiotics through a drip. And so then you've got not only you're having your antibiotics in that form, but you're having to go to hospital. And for some people, that's really stressful as well. So it is something to think about, and I'll put it in a context on my next slide to just help us think about what that might actually mean. I'm very strongly of the viewpoint that it's good to have an idea of what we call ceilings of care. So this is, how far do you want treatment to go? So let's just say we get a chest infection. Do we want to treat it, or do we not want to treat it? And if you don't want to treat it, then you might be kept, well, you will be kept comfortable with palliative care measures, and you may recover or you might die. Okay, and again, that's going to depend on a whole heap of other factors that I haven't got time to go into. If you decide to treat it, then the first step will be the oral antibiotics. And so you might decide in your advanced care plan that that's as far as you want to go. And that if the oral antibiotics don't work, that you're going to go back up into the palliative care measures and be kept comfortable and allowed to die. If you want to live longer, you may go to hospital for IV antibiotics, and you might decide that that's your ceiling of care. Or, if you're still not doing well in hospital there, you might be offered oxygen support. Now, if that's non-invasive and it's just oxygen on the regular ward in the hospital, that's one thing. But if that's not working, the next step will be transfer to an intensive care unit and potentially put on invasive ventilation, so on a breathing machine. So you can see that at each of these steps along the way, you do have choices. And The important thing about an advanced care plan is it gives you an opportunity to think about these choices, not in an emergency. Because, hey, none of us are good at making decisions when we're really stressed and anxious and really feeling that this is a horrible situation. And so, really useful to think about this. Now, what you can do with your advanced care plan is you can talk about stages. So you could say, now, as my life is now, I want the whole lot. But if I am, and I'm just picking some random things, I'm not making any value judgments on these for anybody else, but let's just say I'm living in a nursing home, I'm no longer even able to get out of bed, I am unable to communicate with anyone else. Have I decided previously that at that stage my life wasn't worth living? Going back to the things that we looked at earlier, maybe I'd just go for the oral antibiotics, or maybe that will be the time that I've said, actually, I don't want to be treated. I hope that makes sense in that, so looking at what are the things that give you value in life and meaning in life, and how do you, at what stage would that change for you? And not everyone can do that, and that's okay. Some people just go, I just want to leave it all up to the doctors, and that's okay if that's what's right for you as well. No rules about this. So what do we put in the advanced care plan? This is just the summary. We're going to do our medical treatment decision maker, whoever that be, to carry out those wishes that we've documented. We might want to document our concerns, our goals and fears, both for the person with HD, but also their family. You know, what does it mean to be kept comfortable? I want to make sure that there's no pain, that I'm not suffering. I'm really worried about that. You put that in your plan. You pop in there the types of treatment you'd like to have, or anything that you'd like to refuse to have. It's always worth making the comment about resuscitation. And it can also be really helpful to think about hospitalisation and preferred place of death. And for some people it's really important that they really want to die at home, and for other people they go, I don't want to do that. I don't want my family, you know, having me dying at home. And they have strong feelings that way too. Again, no right or wrong answers. It's what's right for you. And then this is the next bit is my slightly controversial one, is putting in the identified stages where you might like to refuse specific treatments. Most doctors assisting you with an advanced care plan won't feel as comfortable with that, okay? But it's absolutely a legitimate thing to do, and I think Huntington's is a really a good condition to illustrate, because you've seen other people, you know a lot more about what that's going to realistically look like. So I'll finish up just running through a quick example. So this is a lady that I work with Huntington's disease, who is living in disability supported accommodation now, and she's now unable to communicate, and she is hoist transfers and dependent on a wheelchair. And many years ago, back in the earlier days when I was working with her, she developed an advanced care plan, and these are some quotes from it. I would only want life-prolonging measures if I'm still able to interact with family and friends, and I'm still living at home with some independence. I would not want to be alive if I'm not cognitively aware and have some independence. And she said it will be unacceptable being bedbound, unable to look after herself, unable to recognise people and communicate. So, as I said to you, that's where she's at. So she's in that situation now. Now, her preference is to remain, and it was again stated in her advanced care plan, to remain in her current residence if her health deteriorates, or if she's approaching the end of life and they weren't able to manage her, then she was happy to accept transfer to hospital. So she also included an instructional directive, and she said if she had a cardiac arrest. She didn't want to be resuscitated, and she didn't want to be on a ventilator, and she didn't want a PEG tube. So what happened was every time she became unwell, the staff in her disability accommodation called an ambulance and she was going off to hospital. So she was going off to hospital about every 2 weeks, and here she'd said clearly that that's not what she wanted to have happen. But this is the problem with a lot of our accommodation services, is that they have these rules and they're really anxious about how that will play out. And so this is where your advanced care plan becomes critical, because I could come back in and go, hang on a minute, you guys are doing the wrong thing, calling an ambulance and sending her off to hospital, because that's against her wishes. And so what we did is we had another meeting with her family and the hierarchy in the accommodation, and we came up with really clear statement to support her advanced care plan, that we agreed that she was having a comfort-based approach, prioritising good palliative care instead of medical interventions to prolong life. And so in a setting of infection, she'd be managed with a palliative approach, focusing on symptom management rather than receiving antibiotics, artificial fluid or nutrition, hospitalisation, etc. And so since we did that, she has not bounced in and out of hospital any more times. She is being beautifully managed. She's still going, and she's still getting enjoyment out of some things in life. But we're also, her family in particular, I feel so comfortable with the fact that if she does become unwell, as she most probably will, that she will be given really beautiful care that supports her where she's at, instead of this kind of frantic transfer and let's fix everything. I just wanted to, have a really just quickly say, if you're offered palliative care, if that term gets used, don't freak out, because palliative care isn't the same as end-of-life care. So palliative care is about managing symptoms. So in some ways in our service, we talk about the fact that we're a neuropalliative service because actually we're managing symptoms. And so I think it's really just important to be aware that that term, don't get too frightened if it gets bandied around. It means being looked after and kept comfortable. And lastly, and this is, just something to be aware of, is that we're not good at recognising a terminal phase or a terminal stage in HD. It can be really unpredictable, and it can have significant variation and fluctuation, and it's not at all uncommon for people with Huntington's disease to appear to be in a terminal phase, and families will be being told that this is probably it, and then they come good again. And I have many, many patients that's happened many, many times, and we're no better at predicting when that last time will be. There are a few things that can indicate the approach, and mostly it's around increased sleepiness and sometimes some increased agitation. But I do come back to the fact that the chest infection is probably the most common cause of death in Huntington's disease, and so it is the thing to think about when you're thinking about an advanced care plan. Just thinking through the stages of what that means, so that you do have the opportunity to have some say over what treatment you would like to have into the future. I'm hoping that hasn't, I'm very conscious that this topic just brings the tone down, and I'm really, I think it's really important that if you want to be doing an advanced care plan and you haven't got one, that you start the conversation with your medical team, because medical teams are not that good at starting the conversation, because they're worried that they're going to upset you as well. And so it's good to, take that step yourself.
Thank you. Tony Gold is my name. Thank you very much for this particular session. I happen to be the oldest of 7 and 5 of my siblings inherited Huntington's. I became guardian for my youngest brother Christopher, and whilst he was in the aged care facility at Strathalbyn, before he got too bad, I took him down to see Jane Moore from Moore Law. Jane did out the advanced medical directive, and later on, when he was in different accommodation, he was the ambulance was called. Ironically, he ended up with 3 ambulances: the ambulance, the paramedic, and the, what's the other one?
The intensive care
And
one, probably.
palliative care.
Yeah.
And one of the officers, actually, they got in touch with me and they wanted me to change his direction. And I said, no, he wants to die at home. And that's what actually happened in the end. The first time, actually, he recovered, like you said.
Yeah.
But the last time, the ambulance officer said, when he'd read the paperwork through, he said that was the best piece of paperwork he's ever seen.
Yeah, there's so much power in having a good advanced care plan. So thank you for sharing that.
I'm just going to say, if everyone could please join me in thanking Ruth, that would be truly amazing. It is a very sensitive topic, and I think a lot of, if there are any questions, they're probably quite personal. They're probably of a personal nature and are very circumstantial. So Ruth will be here for this afternoon. She is also here for the networking drinks, and we are happy to take questions. For anyone online, if there are any questions, we are happy to share Ruth's details with you. So thank you very much for this afternoon, Ruth.